This is the Cliff Yates Show. Personal growth, motivation, inspiration, and philosophies for a great life.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Cliff Yates Show. You are in the right place because I know you are probably either a high achiever or you want to be, but you are in the right place because it's all about personal growth, inspiration, self-motivation here. And today I want to talk about, as in the title, how our thoughts affect us, specifically how they can affect our health, really positive and negative. And I have been reading from a book called Legacy Living by Paul J. Meyer. Actually, Paul J. Meyer was one of the first, if you want to call them gurus in the personal growth, personal motivation arena. He still has, he has since passed away because he was popular in the 60s and the 70s. And he wrote a book called Legacy Living, or Living for Legacy. I'll have to look. Unlocking Your Legacy. That's the book that he wrote. And I've read it and reread it several times. And like he says in some of his talks, you can find him on YouTube, you have to really sometimes hear things maybe 19, 20 times before they click and you take action on that. Even marketers and people who are advertisers, they realize that people sometimes need to hear or see a message numerous times before it even registers on their consciousness, and they take action on what has been marketed to them or advertised to them. But Paul Meyer, he was just one of the innovators, the first innovators in self-motivation, and his business that is carried on today is Success Motivation International, and they deal with business leadership, obviously self-motivation, motivation in the entrepreneurial world, and all based on a foundation of faith. Christianity. Paul J. Meyer was a big Christian. If you look into it, you can find that many of the business leaders, their foundations are in Christianity. And sometimes they don't put that forward as a first cause because of, society today has taken God out of a lot of things, schools, government, and look what's happening to the country. But our thoughts are so powerful. And so reading some sections today out of the book, I got excited to share these things with you. And as always, it's selfish, of course, because I know I can't share some amazing things with you without being affected myself. So I share with you because I know I'm sharing it with myself. Words that you are hearing, things that you're seeing, hopefully they're going to affect you in a positive way and have a positive impact on your life. I'm getting that also. So I was reading a story that Paul J. Meyer had in one of his chapters. And it really goes to the power of thoughts, specifically on our bodies and on our health, right? And he writes in his book, right, many years ago I was asked to visit a 26-year-old man who was hospitalized with bleeding ulcers. After briefly getting acquainted, I looked him in the eye and I asked, quoting Paul Meyer, if you had nobody to please in life, what would you do? He immediately started to cry like a child. Through tears, he sobbed, I have always wanted to be a farmer. Instead of pursuing his lifelong passion, he was in college working toward a degree he knew he didn't want to use. It was a nightmare for him, each day enduring a life he hated living. He was a square peg in a round hole, the proverbial fish out of water, to a degree that I had never witnessed before. I told him he needed to call in his family, who loved him and who were concerned about him, but who thought they knew what was better for his life than he did, and tell them he could no longer live the life they were planning for him. Out of a mishapen sense of obedience and love for his parents and family, he was trying so hard to be somebody he was not. But it was his life, and he wanted to be the one writing the story. I admired his courage as I watched him, with tears streaming down his face, tell his family what had been on his heart for so many years, and they finally understood. Having made that decision, the healing process began. Don't you find that today? A lot of people are going to college and they're doing what their family has envisioned for them. You know, our family and our friends, they don't have the vision we have, right? If we wore our visions that are in our head as a pair of glasses and we took those off and we put them on our friends and family, it would be blurry to them because they don't have that vision. Their vision is different. So only we know that vision, and we have to do the best we can to communicate what our vision is, our heart's desires. And if we communicate that well enough, we will probably get some sort of understanding from those around us who are trying to do the best for us, who may tell us, hey, you don't really want to do that. They don't know what's in our hearts. And so a lot of times they are giving us advice out of the goodness of their hearts because they don't want to see us hurt. And said, do you know how many people don't succeed in trying to start a restaurant? But if that's in your heart and that's your heart's desire, maybe you'll have to find out on your own whether it's going to be a success or not. So, and as you can see by this story, if you don't live, you know, what your true calling and passion is, it can cause such turmoil in your body because you're living something that's not congruent with your heart's desire. It can cause illness. It can cause a sickness. Here we have a young man who is suffering from bleeding ulcers, and Paul Meyer, he convinced this young man to actually call his family in and tell them what he really wanted to do with his life. And let's see what happened when he did that. So when he called in his family, the healing, it started almost immediately. The doctor attending him was also a friend of mine and told me that within 24 hours of the family confrontation, the young man's ulcers suddenly stopped bleeding. Until then, the ulcers were out of control. The doctors had tried everything and nothing could stop the bleeding. In no time at all, the young man walked out of the hospital, never to return to the hospital or to any college campus again. He didn't go back to college. Now, today, he is a farmer, owns a feed store, has a wife and kids, and is living a life he always wanted to live. I consider him to be one of the richest men I have ever known. Not for the fact that he makes a lot of money, but for the fact that he is pursuing his life's dream and calling. It's funny, right, that Paul describes him as being one of the richest men that he knows of today, not because of the money that he has, but because he's living his true calling. And that's one of the secrets that I learned early on in my positive transformation in my life and career, when I learned one concept, which was really a game changer. If you can learn to enjoy what you're doing while you pursue what you want, it's going to make all the difference because you're going to be open to all the lessons that you're probably learning in your current job as you pursue what you want. But if you're miserable and you're just in such agony over the hatred of what you're currently doing, you can see by this story, and there's numerous stories that would support this, that it's going to have a negative effect on your body, your thoughts. The mind-body connection is so real. And if we get that, we can just make positive changes. Now, it's not about being rah-rah, oh, those positive thoughts, you know, you're not really accepting reality in the way things are. No, we have to focus on, listen, we take reality for what it is. If we're in the middle of a tornado, we're in the middle of our tornado. What can we do? We need to get to the storm cellar. We need to do what we need to do in the current situation. But, you know, the storm is going to go past. It's going to blow through. And so we don't need to stay in the storm center, the storm cellar for another 3 years. Hey, the storm is gone. We did what we had to do at the time to make sure that we survived. But now it's time to turn our focus in a positive way. And we can see, look what happened here. As soon as this young man was living in congruency with what his true calling was, his bleeding ulcers stopped. He never had that trouble again. He didn't go back to college. He started living his true life. And guess what happens with the rest of your surroundings, your family? You know what happens? I'll tell you what happens. They're happier because in their dealings with you, they're seeing someone who's full of joy, who's full of passion. Can you imagine if that's your mindset on a constant basis? Even if you're not doing what you truly are called to do at this current time, but since you have that vision and you know you're moving in the right direction, you're going to be full of joy in everything you do. And not only are you going to be enjoying what you're doing while you pursue what you want, your family and friends are going to be basking in the sunshine of your positive attitude. It makes a big difference. And people who are default to the negative are maybe going to try to pull you in that direction, but you're going to protect yourself and you're going to stay on course to what you know is the right calling for your life at the time. These things can always change too. You may start in one direction and somewhere along the way, you're going to be called in another direction. Now, Paul J. Meyer, he was a Christian, and he felt that his living a legacy. And when we talk about legacy, what is legacy? Legacy is what we leave behind to posterity, to others, maybe family, what we leave behind. Not necessarily always a financial leaving, but it could be other things. It could be we leave behind our teachings. We leave our great memories of us and the impact that we had on people. But it could be money that we leave behind, or it could be property. Right now I'm on our family's island, our personal private island that my grandmother acquired some 70 years ago, right? She got this island and she passed it down. Thank God my parents had the wherewithal to say, we're going to keep this, because my grandmother had left a couple islands and some great shore properties to all of her three daughters and son and the grandchildren. And everybody has since sold their properties that my grandmother left as a legacy, this wonderful place in the Thousand Islands, New York, our own private island, which is not cheap to maintain. Believe me, you have to have some degree of wealth to even just to maintain a property like this. But thank God my parents have now maintained it, and they've given it to us, my wife and I, and now we maintain it. And now our kids have enjoyed it and love it. And they have shown in their hearts that they never want to see this property go away. They're going to maintain it. And now we have grandkids who are eventually going to be here. We have a couple who have already been here, swimming in this wonderful water, being on this beautiful island on summer vacation. So we're going to be leaving this as a legacy. So here my grandmother gathered these properties, and she left it as a legacy. And look what's happened. Generation and generation after that, and another generation after that. And I hear the geese in the background as they fly by, if you can hear that. And so, little did she know, or maybe she had a vision, she was going to leave this legacy. So living for legacy can be a very powerful thing, because we're doing not for ourselves, even though she enjoyed this property, she enjoyed getting it, and she enjoyed leaving it to generation after generation to come after her, living for legacy, posterity. So I was talking about Paul J. Meyer, who, what he said was his ministry was to encourage other people. His ministry was to try to bring other people up. His ministry was to have a positive impact on people based on really a foundation of Bible principles. And so when we talk about this, focusing our attention on the positive, because of the effect it's going to have on us, not only in a positive way, but also we see how negatively thoughts can really affect us and affect our health. And so I'm going to go to, just because of that, I'm going to go to a Bible verse that kind of says this. And this is Paul. Paul, one of the disciples of Jesus, he is writing a letter to the Philippians. So the church in Philippi, he is writing a letter to them. And it's Philippians 4:4-9. And so here's Paul writing to the church in Philippi. And it has to do with focusing our thoughts, right? And getting rid of worry and what worry can do for us, right? We've all heard, right? Hey, man, I was worried sick. You can actually make yourself sick with your thoughts. I'm going to go into that a little bit more in a minute. So in Philippians, whether you're a Bible person or a Christian or not, it is written more than 2,000 years ago. Listen to these words that Paul is writing to the church in Philippi. Rejoice in the Lord always. That was the sentence. And what does he do in the next sentence? He repeats it, and he says it. I will say it again. Rejoice! Exclamation point. So he says it twice. He's repeating himself. Rejoice. Let your gentleness be evident to all. Right? We always say, hey, well, I'm a good person, but I'm closed. I keep it to myself. I am kind and I'm kind-hearted, but I don't show it to everybody else. Well, we should. Let your gentleness be apparent to everybody. Let people know by your actions that you are a kind, generous person. The Lord is near. Okay, nobody's watching. God is always watching, right? Whether you're a believer or not, you know that everybody has it in their heart that they know that there is a God. Some people will say, well, I know there's something. There's a universal presence. Well, it's God. And so regardless of what you call it, we know what it is because it's written in a book that was a love letter from God to us. Do not be anxious about anything. Don't be anxious. Don't worry about anything. Not in emergencies, not in certain situations, but in anything. But in every situation, by prayer. What is prayer? Talking to God. So by prayer and petition, ask and you shall receive. It's not getting. No, you ask and then you get. So we can't leave out the asking. So we're going to talk to God in a personal way. Talk to God. It's a conversation. That's what prayer is. We're talking to God in a personal way. Ask and you shall receive. So by petition. And you do this with thanksgiving. So he says, do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation by prayer and petition with thanksgiving. In an attitude of gratitude, we say, thank you for the blessings that I know you're going to put on our lives. And if you do this, if you present these requests to God, you talk to God, you ask, and you do it with an attitude of gratitude, with thankfulness, and you present this asking with attitude of gratitude to God, the peace of God, which transcends all understanding. That's so important to know that we can't understand God. There is no way. We just can't understand an omnipresent God everywhere spirit. God is spirit. It's beyond the human comprehension. And Paul says this in his writings. Cast your worries and anxieties to God. Ask for what you need. And God, that transcends all understanding. We can't understand it. He will guard our hearts and our minds in Christ Jesus. See, Jesus Christ is the way. We can understand now because God came to earth in human form as Jesus Christ. He is the bridge and the only bridge to God, since we can't understand an omnipresent spirit. But here, let's get to the final part here, which really goes to our thinking and why we need to focus on purpose our thoughts in a positive way. Paul, he writes, finally, brothers and sisters, right? Everybody in the church, men, women, everybody. Finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, focus on truth. Whatever is true, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things. He's telling us to think of everything that's true, what's good, what's praiseworthy. He goes on in Philippians 4:9, whatever you have learned or received or heard from me, or even seen in me, put it into practice, and the God of peace will be with you. So he tells us, think of these good things. Think of things that are lovely. You can imagine what's going on in biblical times. I mean, Jesus was persecuted. He was put on the cross and murdered on the cross. All these people, who suffered all these great tragedies. And in the midst of all this, Paul, who was imprisoned, he writes these letters to the church in Philippi, whatever is good, whichever is true, which is ever praiseworthy. If you've heard my teachings, if you've seen what I've done, and he says, model these things. Earlier, and several times, he says, don't just model what I've done, but model those who are doing things like me. So, and we've heard of this concept in business success today, right? Model people who've already done these things, whatever they're doing, and receive those results. If you do what they've done, there's a chance you're going to you're going to get similar results. Modeling is in the Bible. So I think that's really important, and there's a basis right there in the Bible-based teachings of focusing our thoughts on the positive, because we know what can happen. We know that we can be worried sick, right? How many times have you worried sick? How many times, I think Mark Twain wrote, he said, I worried about a lot of things, and some of them even came true. Sometimes we worry about things and they never happen. And yet we suffered the results of the negative thinking. We suffered the sickness. We threw up with worry because we thought you had been involved in an accident. All night long, we just got sick. I shook. I threw up. And then here, nothing happened at all. Nothing negative happened, but only my thoughts had that effect on my body. Now, there's an amazing study which goes to the mind-body connection that is statistically proves it. It statistically proves the connection between the mind and body. Yeah, and I'm going to go. It's worth noting that the mind-body connection is a fascinating field of research, and there is evidence to suggest that our thoughts, emotions, and beliefs can influence our health in various ways. Practices like mindfulness, positive thinking. We already know, right, with biofeedback, they've had people, they hook people up, right? They can actually slow down their heart rate, lower their blood pressure. They can get into a calming state of mind, and wow. And then they can tell by the biofeedback, right? In they're monitoring everybody's pulse rate and their blood pressure, and they're seeing it lower in real time because of what people are thinking. Practices like mindfulness, positive thinking, and stress reduction techniques have been shown to have positive effects on overall well-being. However, it's important to remember that our thoughts alone do not determine our physical health. Many factors such as genetics, lifestyle choices, environmental factors, and medical interventions also play a significant role in our well-being. There's also studies that have shown us that positive thoughts have the ability to create a harmonious environment within our bodies. When we focus on positive thoughts, we activate the relaxation response, which helps reduce stress and promotes healing. Studies have shown that individuals who maintain a positive mindset tend to have lower blood pressure, improved cardiovascular health, and a stronger immune system. Positive thoughts also enhance our mental and emotional well-being, leading to a more balanced and fulfilling life. I'm going to leave you with this, and you can look this up, right? So they did this amazing study where they found that these medical students were starting to exhibit the symptoms of the diseases they were studying. They were so focused. Their mind was so focused and directed on their study of these diseases and what those symptoms were that were associated with those diseases. They started exhibiting those symptoms: hives, rashes, bumps, and things on their bodies that were symptoms of diseases they were studying. They didn't have these diseases, yet they were exhibiting these symptoms, and it became known as the medical student syndrome. So you can look that up. See, that's how powerful our thoughts are on our bodies. And as I was reading, we see that that's not the only factor, but it can be a contributing factor in our health. And that's going to come into play in one of my next episodes, because now that I'm involved in this Primal Health Coach Institute and I'm learning how we can reprogram our genes, right, in our genes, the negative genes that we may have a propensity to have, like obesity and certain diseases and diabetes, that we can prevent those genes from being expressed because of the positive effect that we can have on those with lifestyle by eating, by the food that we eat. It's not creating a stress on our cells, which is releasing these free radicals that cause a hectic reaction in our cells that can lead to expressing certain diseases. So now we know that we can affect those genes and those propensities with our food, and as we just talked about today, also how our thinking affects it. So hey, positive thoughts. We are not discounting reality and what's actually happening. Hey, If the storm is here, we deal with it. And then, as soon as possible, we focus. Get out of the storm cellar and get back out in the sunshine and start back on our mission. And so it's not about not acknowledging reality. Positive thoughts, we're going to do that on purpose because we know the effect it has on our health and on our attitude, not only towards ourselves, but to everybody around us. Hey, I hope this was helpful, and I hope it was has a positive impact on you, this episode. And if it did, please, if you haven't already, subscribe to the YouTube channel if that's what you're watching and or listening on. And if you're listening on a podcast platform, please subscribe to the channel, because you know what it does? It tells the computer system, whether it's YouTube or one of the podcast platforms, hey, people are interacting with the show. They're liking, they're commenting, and they're sharing it with other people. So we need to show that to other people who are in this arena. All right, everybody, as always, with love. This is the Cliff Yates Show. See you in the next episode.